Hi, and welcome back. Appreciate you coming back. Today we're going to read from Brian Bond's A Lady Came Knocking again. And you remember the last reading we did, he had just met Andy and was helping her out with her car when she confessed that thought she had killed her boyfriend. So he helped her out and took her over to the police station to have them check on it. Next thing you know, there's a couple of cops there going to arrest her. So he told her to have him represent her. We're going to go on to chapter 3 and find out what's going to happen. As soon as Andrea had closed the door, Flats went upstairs to pack a bag. He then checked the cottage to make sure all the windows were closed. Before locking the doors, he went into the garden and, with the help from Jeeves, ushered the hens back into their house. When he was certain that everything was secure, he locked the cottage and got into his car. Jeeves adopted his usual position next to his master, sitting bolt upright to see through the windscreen. Flats pondered for a while. I got everything, he thought. Suitcase, check. Medication, check. Briefcase, check. Oh, that's it, Jeeves. We can go. His first port of call was the police station to see Inspector Bottle. What can I do for you now? He asked. Has Andrea, Miss Langham, requested that I should represent her? The inspector nodded. Indeed, she has. I have preempted your next demand and called the chief inspector in Drury. They are expecting you sometime. He seemed fairly amiable over the phone, and I petitioned him to give you access to all evidence. Lance thanked him and then asked when Andrea would be transferred to Derby. The young lady will be transported from here tomorrow and is due in court this Friday. Keep me informed of any progress you make. The constable approached Inspector Bottle and handed him a folded piece of paper. After a quick glance, he gave it to Flats. That's the address of the police station and contact number. My staff have been instructed that should you call, they are to let me know immediately. They shook hands and Flats returned to his car to find Jeeves sitting in the driver's seat. Move over, boy. He started the engine and drove away from the station, heading for the garage. Reg came out to greet him as he parked up. The two men exchanged pleasantries, and then Flats handed over a set of car keys. When you have changed the tires, would you run the car down to my place and put the keys through the letterbox? I'm off to Derby, but I'll settle up with you when I return. Reg nodded. You have that gleam in your eye that tells me you're up to something. Flats nodded. I need to help Andrea. The poor lass has no family and she faces a bleak future. Reg assured him that he would take good care of the car as requested. After saying their goodbyes, Flats drove off. After being on the road for a while, he spotted a Greasy Spoon Cafe and pulled in. I'm not used to driving far these days, he told his dog. I need a cup of coffee and a sandwich. He wound down the driver's window partway and went into the cafe. He was warmly greeted by a waitress who escorted him to a table and took his order. Flats sat down and scanned the interior. The place seemed clean and reasonably kempt, although the color scheme was dated and not to his liking. His thoughts then drifted towards the task at hand. For the first time in many years, he felt alive and full of purpose. The waitress interrupted his chain of thoughts as she set down 2 plates and a cup. Excuse me, but could I trouble you for a couple of extra napkins? The piece of chicken is for my dog. Give me a couple of minutes and I'll bring some over, she said with a friendly smile. Flats took a bite of his sandwich, and as he slowly chewed, his mind began to mull over Andrea's predicament and account of the events in her apartment. A thought occurred and he removed his little notebook and made a couple of notes. Excuse me, sir, said a strange voice. Do you realize that you have left your car unlocked with the keys inside? Flats looked at the man standing before him. Thank you for your concern, but if you feel brave enough to get in my car to steal it, be my guest. Jeeves, that's my dog, is ferociously protective and sees the car as his property. The stranger gave him a look that suggested he wasn't sure if he was being told the truth, but decided not to pursue the conversation further. He bade Flats a good day and settled at his own table. As he finished his sandwich and coffee, he carefully wrapped the chicken in the napkins provided. The waitress noted his actions and came to ask if she could be of further service. No, thank you. But can you bring me my bill, please? After settling up, he walked to his car and opened the door. Come on, Jeeves, you need some exercise. Taking the keys from the ignition, they walked across the car park to a narrow track. As his dog enjoyed flitting from hedgerow to hedgerow, sniffing the different scents, Flats stopped to look around. The leaves on the trees were changing color and beginning to fall. There was almost a rainbow array of reds, oranges, yellows, and green leaves. Flats inhaled a lungful of fresh country air as he admired the landscape around him. In a field, he could see a few rabbits nibbling on the grass, totally unperturbed by the huge bovine nearby. A pheasant broke cover in front of him, which startled him and broke his train of thought. Come on, Jeeves, we should go. The dog dutifully returned to his master's side as they strolled back to the car, where Flats gave him the chicken and a drink of water before he fired up the engine and continued his journey. Driving was not his most pleasurable pursuit. It was merely a means of getting from A to B. Thankfully, the roads were remarkably quiet, and he was glad as it gave him the time to think in the beauty of the countryside. They passed through the conurbation that was Birmingham, and he couldn't understand why anyone would want to live in such a sprawling concrete jungle. Eventually, they came to the city of Drury, and as he drove through the streets, he looked for a sign to help find the police station. As luck would have it, he spotted a postman and pulled over. He got out of the car and walked over to the postman. After a brief conversation, he returned to his car with a cheery wave and a toot of his horn. He drove away. It only took another 10 minutes of driving, and the large police station came into view. He drove in and parked in a bay that had visitors only sign. With Jeeves at his heels, he entered the building. The desk sergeant peered over his spectacles that were perched halfway down his nose. He looked at Flats and then gazed down at Jeeves before raising his head. What can I do for you? He asked. I'd like to see the chief inspector, please, and I believe he may be expecting me. And who might you be? Tell him Flats McCall is here to see him. Without saying another word, the sergeant raised himself off the counter and walked away. Although he disappeared from view, Flats could hear him talking to someone else. A couple of minutes later, the sergeant returned and he opened the flap of the counter. Follow me. It had been a while since Flats was inside a police station, and some things had noticeably changed. You'll find the chief in there, said the sergeant, and as he pointed to a door with it slightly ajar. Flats nodded as he brushed past and entered the room. Chief Inspector Cotton was a tall man with a weathered face, and from the look of his midriff, he was partial to an ale or two. He offered his hand. Chief Inspector Rory Cotton, this is Inspector Ray Byrne. Steve McGull, formerly known as Flats in the force, and this is Jeeves. The dog gave a short bark. Please take a seat, the chief inspector invited. What brings you all the way up here? Inspector quizzed Inspector Byrne in an abrupt fashion. It's a long way to come for something so straightforward. Young couple seemingly have an argument. He gives her a slap. She clumps him round the head with an ornament. He winds up dead. Flats took an instant dislike for Byrne and his manner. He was average in height and build and sported a mustache that was showing a fair amount of gray hair. His blue eyes had a cold and callous look about them. Might I inquire as to the crime you'll be charging her with? Murder, snapped Inspector Byrne. What evidence do you have? Asked Flats calmly, although inside he was seething with rage. There are two sets of fingerprints on the ornament, one belonging to the deceased and the other match those found on feminine items in the bathroom or bedroom. Bottles of perfume and other makeup stuff, so you can see a very straightforward case, said Byrne smugly. As you have been made aware, I will be defending Mrs. Lingham and would like to see the crime scene and the evidence. Inspector Byrne opened his mouth to speak, but the chief inspector intervened. How about tomorrow at 10? I'll have one of my WPCs meet you there. Thank you. That is most agreeable. Might I ask if either of you know a decent bread and breakfast hereabouts? The chief picked up his phone and pressed a button. White, would you come into my office? A few moments later, young WPC entered the room. Can you help this gentleman find some accommodation and in the morning meet him in Walker's Drive at 10 a.m. with a copy of the file on the Connolly case? The young policeman nodded. Yes, Chief. She turned to Flats. I will meet you by the front door when you have finished here. Cotton was curious. What's the angle with you and Miss Langhorne? How do you know her? She broke down near my home in a filthy wet evening, and I invited her to dry off. We got chatting, and she told me what had happened, that she was no family to turn to. I took pity on her, and as an ex-officer of the law, I wanted to make sure she gets fair hearing. Before Inspector Burns could say another word, the chief inspector told him that he could leave. He wanted to answer back, but knew it would be unwise as he stood up and left. Once again, the chief inspector pressed a button on the phone. Sergeant, could you arrange for 2 cups of tea? And looked at Flats. He said, I hope that will do for you. That would be very welcome. This Inspector Bottle spoke very highly of you. Told me you were one of the best in your day. 2 of us go back a long way. I'd appreciate your affording Miss Langham every courtesy while she is in your custody. Poor woman is very frightened. Well, as your next officer, I give you my word. The sergeant came in carrying 2 cups. So I'd take care of it myself, he said as he set down the cups. Is the dog friendly? Flats nodded. She seemed to know immediately that the sergeant was friendly too and allowed him to make a fuss. After drinking his tea, Flats announced that he should leave to find a place to stay. Just as he left the office, the chief told him to ask if he needed any help. Thank you, and now that I must find the young policeman, what's her name? WPC White, and she should be with the sergeant. So that's what we're going to do right now. Tomorrow or the next day or two, we'll do chapter 4 and see where this is going to head off to find out what happens next. I'm looking forward to finding out myself. So I think the next video I'm going to do will be from Time is Changing, one of my books in the Time Is series. And I know April Fool's passed, but the team decided that they were going to do one of the biggest April Fool jokes ever in the history of mankind, and I think they succeeded from what I know about them. So next reading, that's what we'll be doing, and that's where we'll be going. So I'll see you then, and thank you again for visiting. Hope to see you next time.